9B. Any additional suggestions or input from the public? Mr. Gittrich, Ms. Rountree, it is open up. You can ask whatever question you like.
All right, so I'll go ahead and start. My name is Zachary Gittrich, and I believe Ann is still on. I'm the chair of the Solidarity Research Working Group of the Bloomington Normal Democratic Socialists. Thank you for inviting us to this meeting and allowing us the opportunity to ask these questions of both the police and the Pscrb. I would like to remind everyone we submitted these questions over a month ago to allow for enough time to properly answer them, and we submitted them both to the police department and Mr. Vasquez. And Mr. Vasquez also said he would make sure we have enough time to ask all of our questions. We do understand if some questions might be beyond your purview. Thank you again for your time, and we'll get right into it since we do have quite a few questions. My first question for the Assistant Chief Wemsley is, what kind of incidents are the UCR labeled ZZZ ?
Okay. UCR codes that were ZZZ, that is for something that there is no code for in UCR. That's kind of a catch-all deal that we used to use. That is a code that has no longer been used in probably the last 5 years, because we started using what's called NIBRS, which is called the National Incident-Based Reporting Standard. As of January 1st, 2021, this is something that has been mandated by all police departments in America to use. These stats will then go to the FBI. So that was a code, like I said, that we used to, it was kind of a catch-all if there wasn't a specific code that matched a specific crime. And like I said, we've had 10 reports in the last 5 years that we can find.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
My next question is, what is the process of labeling incidents? Is it a call for services made, the police respond, and based on what occurs, they fill out an incident report with a specific code? For example, a call for a person behaving suspiciously is made, an officer responds and determines the suspect has an illegal firearm. In conclusion, the officer will designate the incidents as, having an illegal firearm and not suspicious behavior, or is it something completely different?
Well, yes, you are correct. Call for service is made. The officer will respond. In reference to kind of the example there, suspicious behavior is not a crime. So the possession of the legal use of firearm would be what the UCR code would be. Now, if further investigation is shown by either the on-scene officer, a detective, additional UCR codes will be added.
To the one incident?
Correct.
Okay. And just to be clear, suspicious behavior is it's not a crime, but it is a UCR code label.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for that. Because my next question is, because multiple charges may be associated with a single incident, is there any process for choosing one incident code over any other, or is it subjective to the officer?
Yeah, that kind of goes back to the last question answer as well. It is subjective to the officer. It's their discretion. Additional ones can be added as we go down throughout the investigation.
So just to be clear, so a call for service can end up having multiple UCR codes reported. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. My next question, I want to throw it to Ann if she's still on the call. I don't know if the IT person can see if she's still on. If not, I'll just...
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I had to unmute. Okay, so Anna Rountree here, and one question is there a specific protocol or special instructions or training dedicated to encountering individuals who, while being detained, may state they suffer from epilepsy?
If they're having, am I still unmuted? I'm sorry. Yes. If somebody was having an epileptic seizure, yes, we will call rescue. There's not a specific protocol, and we call rescue because they're the ones trained to deal with somebody having an epileptic seizure.
Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. Is there a specific protocol or specific instructions? This might end up being the same answer for just any medical emergency, or is it just, it's the same?
Yes, we would immediately call Bloomington Rescue if there was a medical emergency.
All right, excellent. Thank you. My next question is, I was wondering why the uniform crime reports from 2017 to 2019, there was a change in formatting and a decrease in the amount of data that was posted publicly. Can the BPD go back to the more comprehensive UCR of 2016 in the future?
Well, the reason that changed was oh, I had to get some research on that one because I didn't know the answer. Former city manager Hales, that's the way he wanted it reported during that period. That was the only time that had been reported like that. Now that we have switched over to the NIBRs, like I explained earlier, all police agencies will be reporting the same UCR statistics.
Okay, and just remind me again, when did the NIBRs go into effect?
January 1st.
Okay, thank you. We also know that BPD has to track for the state the amount of stops that involve people of color. Does the BPD internally track each individual officer's statistics and compare them with the average within the force to find any concerning outliers?
We do not analyze that data, mainly because Illinois state statute prohibits evaluating one officer's performance against another officer's performance.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and throw it back over to Anne for the next question.
Okay, will you make the information more transparent by posting it to the city's website to avoid citizens having to FOIA?
It is already there. If you go under the police tab, under transparency, you can find all of that information.
I will say that some of the UCR stuff from 2017 onward, I did actually have to FOIA in order to get the complete numbers. So I will let you know that that was my experience trying to get it. The next question is, how many calls result in crimes prevented?
Good question. I would like to say of the roughly 80,000 calls we had last year, all of them. There's no way to measure that.
Okay. How often do dispatches result in an arrest?
That's another thing. We use one system that reports what the dispatch comes in. We use another report writing system. They don't sync together. So it's nothing I could give you exact numbers on.
Oh, okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Since COVID-19, law enforcement agencies have been reducing the amount of people in prison by issuing summons and releasing people. Is cite and release still practiced by VPD?
Yes, we are still utilizing that procedure.
Excellent. Can you give us details about how you think this has worked? Maybe what do the numbers look like for 2020? What charges would a person be released without arrest, and what kind of metrics or policy decisions are officers instructed to use when determining whether to incarcerate someone or release them?
Well, there's no way to really determine how many or what the change has been. I will say that anything that results in some type of bodily harm, danger to society, our officers are going to make the arrest versus doing a cite and release because it's public safety.
Yeah.
We have been using it quite a bit. It's been helpful for the jail. It's been helpful for the state's attorney's office. We've been doing a lot of notice to appears. So yes, it is something that we're still using.
All right, excellent. And the new criminal justice reform law now strongly encourages citations for minor offenses. So will BPD just continue this program from now on? Because those go into effect in 2023, and you'll just continue doing that? Or do you have any kind of plan for how to fully implement that?
I think we're going to continue to evaluate how it's working. And if it's working well, we'll see what we can make it easier for the officers as well as public.
Excellent. And I would also really appreciate if you could make sure that information on cite and release is being given to the Pscrb. My next question is, what traffic offenses require by law a vehicle to be towed? How much discretion is permitted to officers? You don't need to list like every individual statute, but just like kind of broad strokes of that's basically my question there.
Okay, well, state statute, ILCS 625-511-208-7B describes exactly how vehicles can be towed. or which vehicles can be towed.
Okay.
Just for instance, some of that has to do with like a DUI, somebody who is arrested in the commission of a felony offense. Certain felonies allow that, but it gives that statute will document everything for you.
Okay, thank you. I will definitely look that up. Anne, do you want to go ahead with the next one?
You can hear me still?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Has there been an increase in not towing vehicles since the pandemic began?
Well, I will give you the numbers. I think there has been an increase. If I look at the numbers here, 2016, we had 806 vehicles towed. 2017, 729. 2018, 722. 2019, 765. 2020, 844. And I broke it down a little more between February 25th of 20 and February 25th of 21. There's been 853.
All right, thank you so much. Illinois recently passed a police reform bill. We were wondering, what is the department's thoughts on this bill? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? What things are you happy were excluded?
There's a lot in that bill that we're still trying to figure out ourselves. So there's some of the stuff that is in there that contradicts what other laws and policies are already in effect. So there's a lot of stuff we got to do to figure out what's there. And that's a process we're involved in right now.
Okay, and just to let you know, DSA will be providing official guidance in the next month regarding this bill. So we hope that will be useful to you. Does the union contract with the city mandate a minimum number of officers?
No, sir.
Okay. Can you explain Article 20 of the current union contract? It basically says the city agrees it will not replace officers or other officers other than association officers to perform traditional core police functions, including, yeah. Can you explain that a little bit further to me?
That just states that it prevents traditional law enforcement duties from being outsourced to civilian personnel.
Okay. How would it relate to hiring non-police, like social workers, to respond to certain 911 calls to assist someone having a mental health crisis? Would that end up being a conflict there?
There's potential, yes. But that's something that we have definitely, I know that's been on the horizon, and that's something that we've been kind of talking about and looking into.
Okay, excellent.
Mr. Gittrich,
Yeah,
could you let us know what number question you are on?
I am on 18 of 23.
Thank you.
So we're going very fast. Section 5. Oh, go ahead. Anne, do you want to read this one?
Yeah, I've got it. Okay, so Section 5.8 of the current police union contract states the employer shall not compel a bargaining unit employee to speak or testify before or to be questioned by a citizen review board or similar entity relating to any matter or issue. Since the murder of George Floyd, BPD has stated multiple times that they support police reform and increased accountability. Would BPD be willing to drop this clause and allow for more civilian review?
That's something that would have to be negotiated with the unions.
Okay, and what percentage of officers live outside of the city limits of Bloomington?
We do not have a residency requirement, so
Okay, do you have a percentage or no?
I do not know.
Okay.
Okay. The new Illinois Reform Bill, HB 3653, mandates that departments develop a policy for accepting unnotarized complaints. When do you expect to have this?
The unnotarized or anonymous?
Unnotarized.
Unnotarized.
The unnotarized, that'll be something that we're in the process of trying to get paperwork together on. I believe that goes into effect July 1st. The question that I had been submitted was about anonymous complaints, and that is something that will not be accepted by us. That is ILETSB who is going to be accepting them.
Yeah, and I apologize. I ended up changing that, and so that you're correct. Only anonymous will be going to the Illinois Law Enforcement Standards Board, but unnotarized, yes. My next question is, in the Illinois traffic stop study, between 2018 and 2019, there was a change in methodology at the state level regarding consent searches. So previously the data sets were requested, granted, performed and contraband found as far as searches are concerned. In 2019, it was changed to granted, performed, and contraband found, so it's no longer asking requested. Between 2015 and 2018, the number of performed searches was never higher than those granted. However, in 2019, the performed number is significantly higher than the granted number because it seems to be recording all searches performed regardless of consent. So my question is, in previous years, how was the number of non-consensual searches performed counted? Was there any requirement to report that distinction, or were there just no non-consensual searches during that period?
Well, this is something that IDOT changed on their own. We had no say in that. It's kind of hard for me to really answer that because I don't know what their methodology was and why they did that.
Okay, so prior to them changing it, were searches that the person did not consent to, but you still had probable cause to do that, those were still reported?
I believe so.
Okay, thank you so much. Regarding canine searches, there are very few cases whereby a canine alerted and a search was not performed. Do you have any idea of why that might be?
I honestly, I can't think of a reason why. And I
Okay.
racked my brain on that, sorry.
All right. Is there ever a situation where the officer of a canine elicits a false positive response in order to provide grounds for a search? What would happen to the officer if that was discovered by a supervisor?
Can you say that one more time? I didn't have that one, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I apologize. This is just a follow-up one. Is there ever a situation where an officer of a canine elicits a false positive response in order to provide grounds for a search? What would happen to that officer if that was discovered by a supervisor?
Yeah, that would be a question of his integrity, and so that would definitely turn into some type of internal.
Excellent. Okay, and I'm going to let Ann ask the last question for the police, and then we just have a couple of questions for the PSCRB. I promise they're not technical.
Okay. What is the protocol, if any, to deciding who is a CI, confidential informant? And does BPD have a written process? Does BPD keep demographic information on CIs, and are women targeted?
Well, first off, the policy for confidential informants, it's available online or on the city website. One thing we try to avoid using when it comes to confidential informants is juveniles, pregnant females, parolees, or people that are confined to a detention facility. We don't keep track of race, sex, any of that type of jazz in regards to what the confidential informant is. And really anybody, as long as they have information to provide, can be a confidential informant.
All right, excellent.
Okay.
Do you have any follow-up, Ann?
Not for that, no.
All right. Well, I really want to thank you so much, Assistant Chief Wemsley, for answering these questions for us. I know that many of them were very technical. Because we only have so much time, I am going to go right on to the PSCRB members. Ann, would you like to ask them the first question?
I do. Will the members of this board allow for their email addresses to be released publicly so community members can reach out to them?
So I did look at the application, and then on our application, there is that question. Now, I can only speak for myself that you can either put yes, you want it publicized, or no. So I'm not sure about the rest of the board, but that question is on our application when we did sign up for it. Yes, Jeff.
Did Jeff Jurgens have?
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, we might also be able to get you city email addresses. That might be another way to address that issue. So just put that out there.
Excellent. The next question is,
Hold on one second.
Oh, sorry.
I think Ms. Fish wanted to comment. Go ahead, Ms. Fish.
Part of our direction also has been in the past that when something comes up for all board members or something that concerns all of that, we are, because of quorum rules and all that kind of stuff, that we're supposed to go through the current president of the board, who then gets it out to all the members. So that might be one way. If they have a question, they go to the current president and it goes out to all the members and comes back.
Yeah, I agree with Jeff. If we can get an email for the chairperson, and then all the emails can just filter through there, and then the chairperson can be able to share them with the board. Is that something we can do, Jeff?
Yeah, I think Michael and I can talk to IT and certainly work on that.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, we will have that. I'm not going to say by the next meeting, but we'll work on it, and I'll put it on the agenda for the April board meeting and report on that.
Excellent. My next question is, does the board meet at least semi-annually to review the minutes of closed sessions and determine whether there is a continued need to keep the minutes confidential in whole or in part? That might be a question for Jeff.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Yes, and we need to have that meeting. But yes, this board is required to meet and review its closed session minutes, and we are due to do that.
And you guys have already done that several times in the past year?
You know what? That I don't know that they have. I started working more closely with the board this year, and like I said, I think we're probably past due to do that. But absolutely, we need to do that.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. I'm sorry, Mr. Taylor might be able to help me with this, but I believe we did have one. Yes, Mr. Bennett shaking his head. We did have one where we did review closed meeting minutes.
We did. It was in early 2020 when we were reviewing quite a few things related to the existence of the board, as well as things that we were going to do for the annual report. So we are due to have one for the past year, as we did for in early 2020 related to the minutes from 2019. So yes, we are due for that.
And Mr. Chairman, I would suggest maybe we do put that on the next agenda so we can get that done.
Okay, will do.
All right, excellent. My next question is, in Chapter 2, Section 1A of the Pscrb bylaws, it states city staff will create a case number and notify the complainant, subject officer, and police chief of said case number, and city staff will maintain a registry of all complaints received. I'm saying from my own personal experience, I never received any notification of my case number during the intake process. Are complainants and officers being given this information?
Assistant Chief Walmsley, could you help us answer that question? You might have to repeat it.
Are you talking about after you filed the appeal to the PSRB, Mr. Gittrich? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, that's what it states in the bylaws.
Okay. Usually them are given to either PSCRB or to the city legal. I've had a couple that have been mailed to me, which I immediately turn over to legal. So I think Jeff would probably be the best one to answer that.
Yeah, and we've been assigning case numbers, and we've been putting them on the letters that go out. I don't know that that a different notification of that case number being assigned has been going out. So I'll look at that requirement again, and if that's a step that was skipped, we can easily rectify that.
Excellent. And just to follow up with the same question, is the city or PSCRB maintaining a registry of all complaints? Is it something that should be available to the public?
We do keep all of the complaints together. At least in my tenure, we've been doing that. Typically, I'd have to look under FOIA to see if that would, what would be what we could release and what we couldn't release. People who file complaints with, their names are subject to redaction.
Yeah.
But there might be some information that could be released.
Okay. And I promise I only have 3 more questions. Mr. Taylor, last month you stated that if I had spoken at the beginning of the meeting, you don't believe this body would have been able to review my case. I'm wondering why you believe this to be the case.
Thank you for the question. The PSC, excuse me, the PSCRB is a committee, a board who we all take our responsibilities extremely seriously. When it comes to confidentiality, the board has basically in our bylaws, have strict confidentiality rules, whereas the identity of the individual who is the complainant or that the review is about to be made by is that person is not known. When I made my comments earlier about your particular situation, my comments were that had we known that you were the complainant at the beginning of the meeting prior to our review of your complaint, those confidentiality guidelines would have been compromised. So my comment basically was, if we had known who your identity was prior to the review of your case, we would have had a confidentiality problem. And that was the sole purpose of my comment.
Okay, I mean, my reading of the bylaws does not say that. It just says the materials that you receive from the city will be redacted. And it also says you're not allowed to have any ex parte conversations. So theoretically, during a meeting, that wouldn't be an ex parte communication. So
that's not my understanding of the bylaws.
Okay.
The bylaws were put in place for the entire board to be able, without conflict of interest, to be able to review a case without the identity of the individual being known. And in your particular case, in your particular case, we would have known your identity, and therefore those guidelines would have been compromised.
Yeah, and the bylaws don't say that you can't know my identity. It just says the materials that you get from the city are redacted. That's the extent of what the bylaws actually state regarding that. So I would definitely double check that, because it doesn't say anything about I can't show up to a meeting and talk about my complaint and then you wouldn't be able to look at that.
Again, it's not my interpretation of the rule, but
Okay.
you're welcome to your own opinion about that. It's my understanding that the board, as we have in the past, have maintained strict confidentiality guidelines. And in my opinion, it would have been compromised knowing your identity ahead of us reviewing your case.
Yeah, and I'm just saying that you'd have to show me specifically in the bylaws where it states that.
So
My
I
next
hold on,
question,
if
I'm
I
gonna-
may, hold on, if I may, right there. So I understand, right, the different of opinions and then maybe interpretations, but I believe it. Even if you would have, Mr. Gittrich, had your public comment beforehand, at the end of the day, we still had to have reviewed that complaint. So it's not that we wouldn't have. It's not that we wouldn't have not reviewed the complaint. We would have still reviewed the complaint. However, we would have known who the complaint came from. Whether that changes anything, I don't think so. But at the end of the day, we still have to review that.
And let's use a different example. Let's say that a member of the board knows you. That individual would have had to recuse themselves from the review of your case because we knew your identity ahead of time.
Mr. Pastor Bennett, go ahead. So you have your hand up.
Yeah, I would just say, as to the matter, and Mr. Taylor just kind of spoke to what I was going to say. I think Mr. Taylor's comments and maybe, and it may help Mr. Gittrich to understand his comments if we just dive back a little bit to when the board was being formed. We were in great discussions concerning this matter. So we may need to be better informed, maybe by Jeff, on what we actually can know, because when we were originally formed, before we ever seen a case, we went through great detail and conversations that we could not know. That's what we were told, that we could not know the identity of the person making the complaint, or we would have to recuse ourselves. That's what we were told. And I believe legal was there at the time that we were told this, if my understanding is correct. And we went through conversations trying to figure out then, okay, so if someone from a church or someone in the community walks up and say, hey, I got a complaint, can we take it and then turn it in, so on and so forth. So I think Mr. Taylor's understanding of someone who has made the complaint coming to us prior to us viewing the complaint is really based off of the genesis of the board being formed and what we were initially told at that time. And so if that's not the case, Jeff, I would need to be, instructed on that understanding as well. Because my thought also was, if someone had a complaint, came up and told me, hey, I turned in this complaint, you guys are going to be reviewing it soon, that if I would have to try to resist from hearing that information, was my understanding.
And
that's
I
my
understand
exact,
that
and that is my exact understanding of the confidentiality guidelines that were put in place, not only at the inception of the PSCRB, but what we have maintained in the 4 years that we've been in existence.
Jeff, if I may, if you could maybe comment on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think the bylaws are pretty clear here and go to exactly what you were just saying. And they not only, talk about the confidentiality, but they explain the reasons behind it. Saying to provide fair treatment and protect the rights of civilians and police officers. And it also says, in order to allow for an open and honest discussion of the facts of each case, all such materials will be redacted so as not to identify the complainant or the subject officers. And we go to the trouble of, redacting that and listing somebody as the complainant, listing somebody as Officer A, Officer B, and the intent there is just exactly that. So it's kind of a blind review. Nobody, comes into it with any, knowledge of somebody or a bias or that type of a thing. And so that's the intent, and that's what our procedure has been. And Mr. Chairman, I think you're right. I think if somebody, would have spoken in public comment first, yeah, you still have to hear it, but, could cause some recusals, and it goes against that hope to provide that completely blind, fair and honest review.
Yeah,
So,
and as you just said, it specifically only refers to materials. That's it. So it does not expand beyond that. That's not what the bylaws are saying. And you just quoted it. That's what it says. Just materials from the city.
right. The intent, though, is to provide that fair and honest evaluation so that nobody has a bias.
Okay.
And the only thing we can control are the materials we provide.
Exactly. But then let's not also pretend that if a complainant were to come to the board, that somehow that would actually be a conflict of interest, because it doesn't actually say that. It just says you're not allowed to have ex parte conversations.
Yeah.
And if you're at a meeting, that's not an ex parte conversation.
Correct. But what we're trying to say is the hope and the desire, and it's worked, since I think the inception of the board, is they've been able to review these complaints with all the information redacted. So they don't have any, they don't know if they know somebody, and they're able to provide that open and honest look at it.
Yeah, but how is knowing less information about a person more helpful to understanding the situation, right? That's kind of what I'm confused about. And I guess my next question is specifically, why does the PSCRB not invite complainants to tell their stories at the time the board reviews their complaint?
So this might help explain that a little bit. So it's not the charge of this board is not to relitigate and go back to the original complaint. The charge of this board is to look at the conduct of the investigation and make sure that it was properly investigated and that all the rocks were unturned and that kind of thing. So it's not a relitigation where you're having witnesses come and you're talking about the underlying facts of the case. The charge of this board is more to make sure that the police department did a proper internal review.
Yeah, and so how can you make a recommendation on procedure if you're not hearing from the complainant how that procedure affected them, right? I understand you're just looking at procedure, but it really sounds to me like you're just making the person that's making the complaint as invisible as possible.
I'll have, I think Ms. Fish had her hand up first, Pastor Bennett, and then I'll go to you. Ms. Fish, go ahead. Ms. Fish, yeah, there you go.
Okay. what we have been charged with, and which we have for Mr. Taylor and Reverend Bennett, is to be transparent, making a decision based on all the information that we are given, whether it's facts and paperwork and or review of the incident, which we have in the past pulled and gone back and had another meeting. I think one time we actually had 2 extra meetings, that we have to make a decision, or we've been charged. My is the same as Mr. Taylor. We have to make a decision based on facts. We don't make a decision based on race. We don't make a decision based on gender. We don't make any decision except for the facts that are available and anything we are given as far as evidence. And so far, when we come to a decision, it can't be changed because it is based on fact. And Mr. Gittrich doesn't seem to quite understand it yet.
I mean, like, if we just look to last month, you guys were talking and it's like speculating, oh, I wonder what he thinks about this. I wonder what he thinks about this. And so you didn't get the facts of what I was thinking. But if I had been there, I could have just told you. And I would also point out that if it was actually like really transparent, you guys wouldn't be going into closed session to discuss these. Anyway, I'm going to go on because I have one last question that I'm going to allow Anne to ask.
Okay, thank you. So Chapter 1, Section 9 of the bylaws gives you the power to change your bylaws with consent of City Council. What kind of changes do Pscrb members believe should be made to the bylaws?
I'll leave that. Pastor Bennett, go ahead.
Yeah, I have to actually head into another meeting, but I wanted to be able to give this comment. First of all, to the 2 that are joining us from the public and that have even, taken their time to ask these questions. I think the board appreciates it because we talk all the time about our quarterly meetings and wanting more input from the community. So we do appreciate that you're here, even asking questions, because our job as a board is to bring community and police together. I actually appreciate you guys having the questions. I appreciate Chief answering the questions and the board as well. But my comment would be to what Ann just asked and kind of what we were just talking about is I do understand the need to be kind of, not to redact and all of that. But my thought is I also, on the other side, understand that even though we may only make, at this point in time, procedure or policy changes or suggestions of those changes now, that I do kind of feel, at least my thought process is, that it may be needful at times for the board to talk also to the complaint. The same way we can ask questions to an officer concerning their response to the complainant, it may be needful for us to, if we needed to fully understand a complainant's complaint, who better than a complainant to explain something we may not understand in their complaint than the complainant itself. And if there was the need that we don't want to know a person's identity, then my question that, Jeff, you don't have to ask this now, just putting it out there, may be, would it be allotted for the board to be able to give a question to you or a question to someone within the city who can go and ask that to the complainant and at least get our question from them answered, even if we don't necessarily know their identity. And I'm saying that to the aspect, if it ever came up from the board where we said, well, we don't understand this from the complainant, we need more information from them on this, could we at least give that information to someone who could then go to the complainant and bring back that information? And that would be my comment.
Thank you, Pastor Bennett. I always appreciate your comments. That is a good point. Jeff, if that is to happen sometime down the future, is there anything that we would have to change in our bylaws and our ordinance for that to happen? Or can we just, how would we handle that?
I don't think so, and I can give that some thought, but I think if there was ever a situation where, the board thought they needed some more information or didn't understand something, that, yeah, we'd be able to go, I or Michael Hurd as the staff liaison would be able to go and get that additional information.
Thank you. Ms. Antry, Mr. Taylor and then Ms. Fish.
All right, thank you, Jeff, for that comment. From the complaint that Ms. Fish was referring to, where we did have several meetings, those several meetings were needed to get additional information. In those particular cases, we didn't have questions that were to be directed to the complainant, though I do believe that had we needed additional information from the complainant, we would have been able to get that. But we did delay some decision making so that we could get some further clarification to questions that we had that the police were able to provide to us, and we were able to make those qualified decisions. As far as the public comment, I appreciate the comments of the two folks that have joined us today. These are questions that we quite frankly anticipated from the inception of the Pscrb, and it has quite frankly given us things to think about as far as the way we can proceed in the future with changes to our bylaws as we see fit, or as the community sees that we may need to make some changes. The board was put in place several years ago at the behest of several organizations that saw the need for police review, a citizen police review, and those citizens that are members of this board take their responsibilities very seriously, as do I. So I do appreciate your questions. We try to live within our guidelines as we interpret them to be, and whenever there are questions about the guidelines, that's why we have Jeff, who keeps us on the straight and narrow, and keeps us pretty well focused on what it is that our responsibilities are, from the understanding of the ordinance and the purposes for which the board was put in place. So I thank you for your question.
Ms. Fish.
Basically, my answer was the same as what Mr. Taylor just gave, that we have had instances where we did ask for additional information and we had no problems getting it from the city and or the police department. And again, if someone, I'm just agreeing with Mr. Taylor that we have had that situation, and we've had situations in especially our quarterly meetings where we have made recommendations, and at this point, as far as I know, for example, the complaint form, there were a lot of suggestions from the stakeholders on changes, such as putting it in Spanish, where we have definitely, and the city and the Bloomington Police Department have followed through on it. So at this point, anything that we have forwarded or the stakeholders have asked us to look into changing has happened. So again, I agree with Mr. Taylor completely, and that's it.
Ms. Rountree, thank you, Ms. Fish and Mr. Taylor. Ms. Rountree, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess
I believe you.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I believe Zach may have had a follow-up.
Yeah, so one suggestion that I would like to run by you, and I'd like to hear your opinions about, perhaps PSCRB members should have access to all complaints, being that they're all FOIable, so they are all accessible to the general public. And if a complainant or the police or a board member requests special review, then it could be reviewed by the whole board. I'm wondering what individuals of this board think of that. The information, like if you were to FOIA the complaints, it would still be redacted, right? You still wouldn't have any information regarding that. So I would be interested in hearing your opinions regarding that recommendation.
I will give the board 5 minutes on this because we do have Mr. Machika on here too, and he hasn't.
Oh, I apologize,
he hasn't had a chance to have his questions or whatever. But does the board? Yes, Mr. Woodard, go ahead.
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Gittrich, what do you mean by all complaints?
Well, I mean, all complaints that are filed with the Bloomington Police Department, like you guys don't see them all, you only see the ones that are referred to you. So, like, for instance, I have access to more complaints than you guys have seen. And so I guess my recommendation is any complaint that comes in should be available for you to review at your own discretion. And then if you think there's reason to look into it further, then the full board can do the actual like review process. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. But it also speaks to the process where a person who filed that complaint, it would be up to that person whether or not they want us to review the complaint, right?
Well, currently, yes, but what I'm suggesting is that you actually open that up. If that might be actually better to having greater transparency and greater accountability if you open that up, right? Because it is within your powers. You can change the bylaws so that you can see all complaints.
Sure, I understand that. Thank you.
Ms. Fish, go ahead.
I think the way it's set up now, the complaints go through the process with the Bloomington Police Department. A citizen or complainant has the right to say, wait a minute, I don't agree with that, and come to us. So if it doesn't come to us, the person that filed the complaint has agreed they were either wrong or they understand now. So it's over and done with. So I don't understand why we still need to review it.
Ms. Farmer, go ahead.
I might be misunderstanding, but I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the suggestion was not that we review every single complaint, just that we have access to all of them and that the board sort of receives all of the complaints redacted accordingly. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
That's correct, Ms. Farmer, or Dr. Farmer, excuse me.
Thanks for clearing that up.
Mr. Gittrich and Ms. Rountree, any other questions before we move on here or comments?
I don't.
I am all done.
Well, I want to thank you very much for attending, first of all, and bringing your concerns or questions or comments or whatever it may be to our board and to the Bloomington Police Department. Ever since the initiation of this board, our goal is to bridge that gap and to have any questions answered that the public has. That's what we're here for, and we look forward to continuing to have this same conversations in the future. I encourage you to attend more board meetings and or quarterly meetings. And, maybe if you have somebody that from an organization or a friend that they may have a question and are just not sure, I encourage them to have them come forward and have their question answered.
Yeah,
So
well,
thank you very much for attending.
Yeah, thank you so much for opening up, allowing us and answering all of our questions. Thanks again to Assistant Chief Walmsley. You were very helpful in getting some of this stuff figured out. And as I said before, the Bloomington Normal DSA will be issuing guidance regarding the new police reform bill. We might come to the next meeting and present that to you, but it will be within your purview. So thank you again, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Mr. Machika, I see you were on. Did you have any questions, comments? The floor is yours, sir.